So we have another one. It is called the Holy Roman Emperors. Now, of course, this is a different time. I'm sure we're going to start with Charlemagne. And then the last Holy Roman Emperor, I guess, will be the emperor in the time of Napoleon Wars. So we got a lot of time to go through this. Let's jump in right away.
Hi, this is Matt Baker. Today I'm going to show you the family tree of Holy Roman Emperors. I'll be using the latest version of my European royal family tree West chart, which can be purchased as a poster from our website, UsefulCharts.com. A few months ago, I did a two-part series on the family tree of Roman emperors, starting with Augustus and going all the way to the crowning of Irene of Athens in the east and Charlemagne in the west.
Hmm.
Today's video will therefore start where that one left off. I'll show you how one part of Charlemagne's empire eventually became the Holy Roman Empire, and then how the Holy Roman Empire eventually became the Austrian and German empires.
Hmm.
Charlemagne started out as king of the Franks and king of Italy. However, in the year 800, he was crowned emperor as well, becoming the first person in Western Europe to hold that title in over 300 years.
Immediately, like that's just a new thing. First ruler in Western Europe to be crowned emperor since the fall of Rome in 476. What does this mean? Does that mean that the Roman Empire is being revived in this weird Frankish way? Is it just being maneuvered? So many questions contemporary, probably.
Some people see his crowning as the beginning of the Holy Roman Empire, whereas others, like myself, prefer to call this early stage of the Empire of the Franks. This is because the original empire contained both France and Germany, and therefore I think it's better to wait to use the term Holy Roman Empire until after they split. That split occurred after the death of Charlemagne's son Louis the Pious. At this point, West Francia started to evolve into France, and East Francia started to evolve into Germany, with
Okay.
Middle Francia quickly fizzling out. Note that the first ruler of East Francia was called Louis the German. This is because even then it was understood that East Francia basically corresponded to what the Romans had called Germania. Louis the German originally split his kingdom into three parts: Bavaria, Saxony, and Swabia. But eventually his youngest son ended up inheriting all three. He was known as Charles the Fat, and he was also the first
I guess he was big.
person from East Francia to obtain the title of emperor. Originally, it had gone to his uncle Lothair I, and then to Lothair's son Louis the Younger. But when the Middle Frankian branch of the family ran out of male heirs, it was first taken by Charles the Bald of West Francia, and then by Charles the Fat of East Francia. But by this point, the empire was really starting to crumble. So, for the next few decades, the title of emperor bounced around between a bunch of different people, including Guy of Spoleto and his son Lambert, Charles the Fat's illegitimate nephew Arnulf, Louis the Blind, and Berenger of Friuli. During this time, Arnulf and then his son Louis III held the title King of East Francia.
Okay.
However, after the death of Louis III, the only remaining male line descendant of Charlemagne was Charles III, the King of West Francia. In order to avoid having to merge once again with the West, the German nobles decided to elect a new king instead. They chose a Frankish duke named Conrad, and then after he died, they chose a Saxon duke named Henry the Fowler.
So it becomes an elective monarchy, as you can see right there, with Conrad, which is very different. Obviously, Poland, Lithuania had a elective monarchy, so this is kind of like a interesting new. I wonder, is it? I wonder, is the HRE like? I think it stays an elective monarchy, right? I'm not sure. We'll have to see.
This marked the first time that Germany was united under a non Frankish ruler. Henry even planned to travel to Rome, and claim the title of emperor. But he died before this could happen, and thus this task was left to his son Otto, who would eventually become known as Otto the Great. So Otto started out initially as just king of East Francia. However, in the year 961, he captured Italy and was crowned emperor. Thus, the year 961 marks the true beginning of the Holy Roman Empire, because from this point forward, the title of emperor would be reserved only for those who were also king of Germany. During Otto's rule, the empire experienced a mini renaissance. The like title of emperor would be reserved only for those who were also, from this point forward, the title of emperor would be reserved only for those who were also king of Germany. During Otto's rule, the empire experienced a mini renaissance, the likes of which hadn't been seen since the days of Charlemagne. So note that
You know about that? A mini renaissance. You have to explore that more.
on this chart, German kings are always in yellow boxes, but only those with the crown symbol achieved the title of emperor.
Okay.
Otto the Great was followed by his son, Otto II, and then by his son, Otto III.
They like
But
Otto.
Otto III died young, without any children. So at this point, the throne passed to his second cousin, Henry II. Now remember, the title of
So this is no longer elective, as you guys can obviously tell.
German king, and thus Holy Roman Emperor, was technically an elected position by this point.
Really?
However, the nobles did usually try to keep an existing dynasty going.
Okay. I guess that clears it up. I think it's very much probably not that elective in who is electing who.
If they could. This became more difficult after Henry II died, again without any children. So at this point, the German nobles elected Conrad II, who was a great-great-grandson of Otto the Great via a female line.
Okay.
During his reign, Conrad II conquered the kingdom of Burgundy.
Hmm.
So now the Holy Roman Empire consisted of three main kingdoms: Germany, Italy, and Burgundy. Conrad II's line continued for 3 more generations before it too ran out of heirs. At this point, the leading candidate for king was Frederick II, Duke of Swabia. He was both a grandson of Emperor Henry IV via a female line, as well as a member of the powerful Hohenstaufen dynasty from Swabia. However, the nobles wanted a less powerful emperor, so they elected a count instead, who became Lothar III. Lothar had only one daughter and no sons, so when he died, his son-in-law Henry X, the Duke of Bavaria, expected to be elected the next king. But instead, the nobles went for Frederick II's younger brother, Conrad III.
Conrad is like the transitional monarch name 3 times in a row now.
This set up a rivalry between the houses of Welf and Hohenstaufen, also known as the Guelphs versus the Ghibellines, that would last for the next 100 years.
Whoa.
Generally speaking, the Guelphs were aligned with the papacy, whereas the Ghibellines were aligned with the Hohenstaufen emperors, and thus the rivalry also represented a struggle between church and state.
I remember this time. Yeah, this is around like the time of the War of the Bucket and so forth.
Conrad III participated in the Second Crusade alongside Louis VII of France, but he was never actually crowned emperor. And although he had a son, the nobles elected his nephew, Frederick Barbarossa, instead, Barbarossa being a nickname meaning red beard. Frederick Barbarossa was crowned emperor, and during his reign, the empire experienced yet another mini renaissance. He participated in
Interesting.
the third.
What does that mean though? Renaissance. Like obviously it means rebirth, but when I think of Renaissance, I think of like an explosion of the contemporary arts and enlightenment as well.
Crusade, alongside Philip II of France and Richard the Lionheart of England. Frederick Barbarossa was followed by his son Henry VI, but when he died unexpectedly at age 31, a civil war ensued. Some of the nobles elected Henry's younger brother, Philip of Swabia, but others elected Otto IV from the House of Welf. Otto IV's mother was an English princess and the sister of Richard the Lionheart, so he received the backing of England as well. For the next 10 years, neither king was crowned emperor. But then, in 1208, Philip of Swabia became the first and only German king to be assassinated. Otto IV was, of course,
That's interesting that it was the only, you know? But I guess when you have such a decentralization of the HRE, I mean, you could say it's not, but you have such a decentralization of HRE. For some reason, there's probably a lot of buffers to get to Philip.
suspected of
I mean, they got to Philip, but in general.
being involved, but he denied it, helping to prosecute the perpetrator. This did leave him as sole king, though, and later that year he was crowned as emperor, becoming the only person from the House of Welf to ever hold the position. Although note that his distant male line relatives, through his brother William, ended up becoming the kings of Great Britain under the name the House of Hanover.
Ah,
That's the house that Queen Victoria belonged to. But back to Otto IV. He quickly fell out of favor with the Pope and was eventually deposed, leading Henry VI's young son, Frederick II, to be crowned king and then emperor. He had previously inherited the crown of Sicily from his mother, and he also became the king of Jerusalem through his wife.
that's a lot of territory.
So, during his reign, the territory under the control of the Hohenstaufens reached its peak.
Yeah.
He had a nice long reign, but then after he died, things started to quickly fall apart when his son, Conrad IV, died after just 4 years. His death marked the beginning of the Great Interregnum.
Great interregnum, no German king and no Holy Roman Emperor. What is that? 62 years without an emperor? I'm interested. What would be the key? Okay, so obviously it died off because of this. How did it come back?
In which there was no German king for 19 years and no emperor for 62 years. The next phase in the history of the Holy Roman Empire is known as the period of the Count Kings.
Count kings.
This is because most of the kings that were elected during this period had previously been counts, a relatively low rank in the grand scheme of things.
In the grand scheme of
Basically, the
things,
crown
yeah.
passed back and forth between 4 different houses before finally settling on one of them. So initially there was Rudolf from the House of Habsburg, then Adolf from the House of Nassau. That's the same family that eventually came to rule in the Netherlands. And then we
Oh.
get another Habsburg, Albert I. Note, however, that none of these 3 German kings were ever elected emperor. However, the next Count King to be elected was Henry VII from the House of Luxembourg, and he was elected emperor, thus ending the Great Interregnum.
In 1312, so they only had 1 year of being emperor.
He was followed by Louis IV from the House of Wittelsbach, and then by Henry VII's grandson, Charles IV. Charles IV's father, John the Blind, had inherited the kingdom of Bohemia through his wife. So Charles IV ended up becoming the first king of Bohemia to also hold the title of Holy Roman Emperor. He was followed by his son Wenceslaus, who was not crowned emperor and was eventually deposed and replaced with Rupert from the House of Wittelsbach. He too was never crowned emperor, and when he died, Wenceslaus's brother Sigismund was elected.
Okay. So we're in the 15th century. Sigismund is emperor after this interregnum period. There have all these count kings, and now the House of Luxembourg is holding the keys to the castle, actually.
Sigismund became the last of the 3 Luxembourg emperors,
Never mind. You just give me the keys back.
and through his wife, he became King of Hungary as well. However, because he had no sons, his various crowns ended up going to his son-in-law, Albert, who was from the House of Habsburg.
For 1
And
year.
it's from here onwards that the Habsburgs really start to dominate. Although when Albert II died after his very short reign, it was actually a different branch of the family that rose to prominence. While the crowns of Bohemia and Hungary went to Albert's offspring, the crown of Germany actually went to his second cousin, Frederick III, who was then crowned emperor, and who ended up having a nice long reign of 53 years.
Yeah.
He was followed by his son Maximilian I, who married one of the richest women in Europe at the time, Mary, the reigning Duchess of Burgundy, which by that point included the Low Countries, aka the Netherlands. Their son, Philip, then married Joanna, daughter of Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile.
And this is where we get into Spanish history, which we did those monarchies yesterday, actually. So this kind of gives you an idea of where this union came from.
Setting up Philip and Joanna's son Charles to receive the best inheritance that anyone has ever received.
Yeah.
Not only did he become the Holy Roman Emperor, but he also inherited the Low Countries as well as the crown of Spain,
I mean, geez, that's a lot of territory.
which by then included all of South Italy. So, yeah, he basically ruled more of Europe than anyone had ruled since the time of Charlemagne. However, before he died, he made a wise decision. He decided to split his dominions between his son, Philip II, who inherited Spain and the Low Countries, and his brother, Ferdinand I.
So Ferdinand's and so forth, that way is going to be the emperorship.
Who ended up getting the title of Holy Roman Emperor. Through his wife Anne, Ferdinand had also inherited both Bohemia and Hungary. So once again, the crowns of Germany, Bohemia, and Hungary were united under a single ruler. From this point forward, the Habsburgs split into two branches. Ferdinand's descendants became known as the Austrian Habsburgs, Austria being their main territory within the Holy Roman Empire, while Charles's descendants became known as the Spanish Habsburgs.
Makes sense. One's Spain, one's Austria.
Although the Spanish Habsburgs were the more senior branch, in this video we're concerned with the Holy Roman Empire.
Yeah.
So we're going to continue by following the Austrian branch. Ferdinand I became the first Holy Roman Emperor to receive the title automatically as soon as he was crowned King of Germany. So basically, the separate imperial crowning by the Pope was done away with at this point.
Very good point to put out there, because prior to that, you'd almost need like a blessing, or it would need to be an extra step to get the Pope to sign off on it.
His brother Charles V being the last person to be crowned in this manner. Ferdinand was followed by his son Maximilian II, and then by Maximilian's sons Rudolf II and Matthias. But neither Rudolf or Matthias had any legitimate sons.
Darn.
So after Matthias, the throne passed to their cousin Ferdinand II.
Okay.
By this point, the 30 Years' War had begun, which, according to some estimates, would go on to become the deadliest war ever fought in Europe up to that point. It was basically about three
I don't know if I've heard that before. That's another interesting point.
things: Catholicism versus Protestantism, imperial authority versus local autonomy, and the Habsburgs versus the Bourbons. The war lasted through Ferdinand II's reign into that of his son Ferdinand III's. In the end, the Austrian Habsburgs were still emperors, but their overall power had been weakened. Ferdinand III was followed by his son Leopold I, and during his reign, two important things happened. One is that the line of Spanish Habsburgs became extinct, leading to the War
Yeah, because of incest.
of the Spanish Succession, in which Leopold tried to get his second son, the future Charles VI, to be crowned King of Spain. But that didn't work,
He don't look too different than Charles II, though.
and the House of Bourbon ended up getting the throne of Spain instead.
Mm.
The second thing is that the Duke of Prussia from the House of Hohenzollern, who also happened to be the Elector of Brandenburg, a major state within the Holy Roman Empire, was elevated to the rank of king, initially as the king in Prussia, and then later
Is that because of the Pope?
as the king of Prussia. This set up a situation in which there would soon be two major German powers in Europe, instead of just one. Leopold I was followed first by his son Joseph I, and then by his son Charles VI. But neither ended up having any sons, and therefore this led to the War of the Austrian Succession. Charles wanted his daughter, Maria Theresa, to inherit everything. But because German law did not allow females to become king, she was only able to inherit the kingdoms of Bohemia and Hungary, as well as the Archduchy of Austria.
And we saw a similar thing happen after around this period, a little bit after around this period, in Russia.
The title of emperor was eventually given to Charles VII from the House of Wittelsbach, the son in law of the previous emperor, Joseph I. But when he died, it was then given to Maria Theresa's husband, Francis I, from the House of Lorraine. However, the more important thing that happened as a result of the War of the Austrian Succession was that Prussia, under the leadership of Frederick the Great, became firmly established as a second major German power.
Yeah, and we talked about Frederick the Great, and I'm excited to talk more about Frederick in the future and the state of Prussia and how it really became a thing. But this is right in line with their expansionism and their growth.
These two powers, Prussia and Austria, would go to war again during the reigns of Frederick the Great and Maria Theresa. This time during what's called the 7 Years' War, which in a sense was the first real world war.
Yeah,
Because not only was it fought in Europe,
it was fought everywhere.
but also in the Americas and Asia. Another notable thing about the 7 Years' War is that Prussia and Austria ended up trading allies. Previously, Prussia had been allied with France, and Austria had been allied with Great Britain. But this time it was the opposite. Prussia was now aligned with Great Britain, and Austria was aligned with France. The Anglo-Prussian
Which made it easy for England and France to go to war with each other in the colonies. Which, if they were aligned, obviously, who knows?
alliance won the war, meaning that the King of Prussia continued to get stronger and the Holy Roman Emperor continued to get weaker.
So I wonder also if anyone has this answer. When did the Austrian Empire or the German Empire, that's the branch of the HRE, really start to lose power? I can imagine it would be around this time.
Maria Theresa and Francis I were followed by their sons Joseph II and Leopold II. However, note that at this point, the ruling house was now the House of Habsburg-Lorraine, since the original House of Habsburg was now extinct in the male line. Also note that Joseph II and Leopold II were the brothers of Marie Antoinette, who famously lost her head during the French Revolution.
That's right. She is of Austria. Oh, really?
Leopold II's son, Francis II, would end up being the final Holy Roman Emperor because during his reign, the Holy Roman Empire ceased to exist,
He dissolved it.
primarily due to the conquests of Napoleon. However, before he gave up the title of Holy Roman Emperor, he also made himself Emperor of Austria. So once the Holy Roman Empire was gone, he and his successors actually continued to hold the title of Emperor. It's just that they were the emperors of Austria instead. Once Napoleon was defeated, what had previously been the Holy Roman Empire was reorganized as the German Confederation, and Francis I of Austria was appointed as its president. But this resulted in a rather strange situation, because half of Francis's empire was now part of the German Confederation.
Tricky business, a tricky business.
But the other half was not. Of course, Prussia was still a major player at this point, and eventually tension between Prussia and Austria built up again.
And then you get the Austro-Prussian War,
resulting in the Austro-Prussian War of 1866. By this point, Francis II's grandson, Franz Joseph, was now the Austrian emperor. He went to war against
a long rule too. Look at that rule. He was young when he got in office.
Wilhelm I, who at this point was simply the King of Prussia. Wilhelm I won that war, leading to Austria being kicked out of the German Confederation and the whole thing being reconfigured as the Northern German Confederation instead. But the Northern German Confederation didn't last long because it was soon reconfigured as the German Empire, with Wilhelm I being given the title of German Emperor or Kaiser, a throwback to the Roman
Caesar.
term Caesar.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Otto von Bismarck, the man who had done the most to help create the German Empire, was appointed as its first chancellor. So now there was both a German emperor and an Austrian emperor, a situation that would continue up until the end of World War II.
It's crazy that Franz Joseph he lived through like one, two, three, four different German Prussian leaders.
In a few weeks' time, I plan to remake my video on who would be kings of Germany today. So at that point, I'll continue following the trees from Wilhelm I and Franz Joseph down to their current heirs today. But for now, let me.
And by the way, yeah, did you see that? Maximilian, which is his brother, became Emperor of Mexico for a couple years. But that didn't last too long. But wow, this is eye-opening. The HRE is such a difficult subject matter because obviously you can say it retroactively started with Charlemagne and it ended with Francis II, and then of course those two states kind of become Germany and Austria, and then behind that you have a lot of interesting things, whether it be the Habsburgs, whether it be Pope versus Emperor. You have Bourbons waging war. You have Maria Theresa versus Frederick the Great in the 7 Years' War, and then there's so much more history way before that in the other 700 years or 800 years of time. It's hard to just dissect this all in one video. Because of that, let me know if there's any video suggestions that you guys have. Put them in the comments below. Love these videos. Useful Charts is very useful. These charts are very useful, so their name sticks. I appreciate you guys. Consider subscribing, and peace out. Goodbye.